there's something to do with those interactions, isn't it? And I will try to share some thoughts. You might agree, you might not agree. Perfectly fine to disagree. It's all right. Which might be for you to start thinking a little bit when it comes to having conversations like that. So when you're having a conversation, before moving to those things, probably I need to use this quote. This is a very, very powerful, very good quote, I would say. What Maya Angelou said was, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But they will never forget how you made them feel. I hope we all have someone or maybe a set of people in our lives who are the same like that, right? So it's all about interactions. It's all about how you do those interactions with those people. Okay, so I'll try to share some thoughts. Again, it's perfectly fine to disagree. And if you have thoughts, please shout out. I mean, it's a very small audience, so we would like to have an interactive conversation, no problem. So just raise your hand, share your thoughts. Perfectly fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. So one thing, I mean, probably we need to think about would be, don't ever multitask. And we know, like, you know, when we are having Teams calls and different things, we always do that. But the person on the other end will feel it. He or she will feel disrespectful, and he or she will not get engaged on the conversation. Do you want the other person to multitask? And remember, multitasking is not just paying attention to something else. Remember that. Researchers has said, for humans, we can speak up to 250 words per minute. But we can listen up to 500 words per minute. Which means, like, when we are in a conversation, even though we are not looking at our phone or maybe a text, still, inside our head, we might be thinking so many other things instead of the conversation. I think probably we all have heard the saying, like, you know, if you want to show that you are listening, you need to nod, you need to look the person in the eye, you need to rephrase what he or she is saying. I would say those are crap. If you really want to pay attention, you really want to pay attention. Otherwise, the other person will feel it, no matter what you do. And also, the other important thing, now when you are capable of listening 500 words in a conversation, what happens is, sometimes, you know, when you're having a good conversation, sometimes you want to say something. By the time you realize that, you stop listening to that person. And you try to think about how you're going to put those words out. So by the time that happens, what happens is, you get disconnected from that person. So if you really want to build a connection, it can be a personal connection with your kids or maybe senior citizens, or maybe it's a professional connection. Still, please make sure that you pay attention. And then the other important thing is, do not pontificate. Do you know what the meaning of pontification? It's more like, if you really want to express your opinion, if you want to express something that you believe is right to the other person, that's pontification. If you want to do that, write a blog or a video log, whatever. You don't want the other person to have interaction, right? There's no purpose for that. And even for us, when you are in conversations with people like that, if they do that, you really don't want to be in those conversations, isn't it? And also, I think this quote is really, really interesting. What Mr. Bill Nye said was, everyone you will ever meet will have something that you don't know. So try to get into a conversation, even with your kid, thinking that you can learn something from that person. I can give a very, very simple example. It was it was a conversation that I had with my son, who was like, by that time he was like around 6-7 years. So when I normally park my vehicle, I normally face my front towards the wall. That's how I park it. And at one day, my son asked, Tati, why do you park it like that? Because every day in the morning, you have to reverse and then go. Normally, we are late all the time in the morning, so why do you do that? Then I just step back and start thinking. The reason was actually there was a kind of a tree long time ago. Because of that, I simply can't reverse and park. But that tree is no longer there. But I just still keep on parking like that. So you have something to learn every day. So try to think like that. And I think this is something that you all know. So when you have a conversation, don't try to use close words. I mean, that's something obvious, right? You start something with, what, why, who, when, and who, right? So that will give you a kind of a, more horizon to have a conversation. I mean, if you are working in a multinational company, when you start a conversation, normally what you do is you start your conversation with, how are you doing? Especially when you have colleagues in Europe or US. I mean, it's so boring that you even without that person asking question, you know that you need to answer, I'm fine, how are you? That's really boring, isn't it? Isn't it? But we still keep on doing that. So don't do that. At least you can try something creative. At least you can try something creative. I will not give you tips, then it becomes more like mechanical. Try to be creative, use your own words. Okay, and I think this is also kind of to what you said, we don't know everything. So in a conversation, if you don't know something, say you don't know. That's perfectly fine, rather than trying to fabricate or rather than trying to pretend that you know everything. No, it's not going to happen, right? So be frank. Just say you don't know. Probably you might get something back from the other person which you can learn from that person. Or that might even lead to a conversation where together you might be able to learn something new also. And the other important thing is when you have a conversation, always try to go with the flow. So it's kind of connected to what I said earlier also. Now when you start thinking about a new idea, by the time you thought about it, you stop listening to the other person. So that breaks the flow. And then what you are thinking would be just to put your idea out. That might not be relevant to that person on the other side. So always don't think about that. Try to go with the flow. Try to have the conversation more like a flow. It go in the direction where both the parties who will kind of direct the flow also. That's fine, right? And okay, this is also kind of an interesting thing. So when someone shares a kind of experience, do not relate that experience to your experience. You are there to listen to that person. He or she is not there to listen to your experience. Let's say I have this particular pain. I got this injury, and then I start talking about my injury. So not two people are the same. They have different contexts. Let's say if you talk about your kids, the pain that you are going through, don't talk about the pain that you go through. Try to listen to that person. Because it's not the same. It's not the same. It's different. So if you really, really, really want to have a meaningful conversation, try to make sure that you listen into that person. And normally what we have heard is actually repeating the same thing over and over again is good if you want to highlight something. But again, if you really want to have a meaningful conversation, that's not a good thing to do. When someone keeps on repeating the same thing over and over again, you tend to lose focus on that. Any thoughts? I also feel like I'm kind of talking to a wall now. So any thoughts, any different opinions?
Do you consider a kind of a presentation or this kind of a session as a conversation? Is this all applicable if it is so, right?
Exactly. So that's a really, really good point. I was thinking about it, but I didn't know about the audience, the number and the count. I mean, if I would have known that it's a very small audience, I would have prepared to have a kind of a conversation. To be honest, I actually did the last two slides while I was sitting here. So, but that's a really, really, really good point. So probably that's something that I should try doing, and maybe mimicking certain behaviors, probably.
And the cultural context also.
Yes, true. Because depending on culture, there are certain different behaviors also. That's true. That's quite true. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? Sorry?
Whom that we are going to have a conversation, like
Exactly, yes.
sometimes for the kid we are saying thrice.
That's true, because the other thing, now that's a really, really important thing. Like now, when you are having a conversation, especially with the kids also, I mean, it becomes very interesting, right? I mean, if you have kids, you know how it goes, right?
I think she mentioned the kids. It's more of husband and wife.
Okay.
You just put the
Kid for, just to make sure that it's more diplomatic. True. Yes, I do have the same experience. So, right. And the other important thing is when you have a conversation, forget about the numbers, dates, names, places, because I mean it doesn't really make sense. For example, if I have a conversation, oh, I have my friend Sahampati who's doing this, you don't care about Sahampati, right? Just try to stick to the point. Try to discard all the names, numbers, and places. It's not relevant. And that will, I mean, if you start keep using those things, that will, I mean, it will lead to a kind of a boring conversation, isn't it? Right? So whenever you do a conversation, try not to stick, or maybe try not to use the words or the names especially. And then, again, I think listening is a really important thing, and there are so many different quotes about listening. And I would like to highlight like one quote that was made by Lord Buddha, for example. If your mouth is open, you are not learning. You have heard about it, right? So when you are having a conversation, the most important part would be to listen. But I have heard this funny phrase. I don't know whether you all have heard this. Lots of elderly people, even sometimes us, people in our generation says, I don't understand my kid. They don't listen to me. So how can you understand your kid without listening to them? What you're saying is, I don't understand my son because he's not listening to me. So while my son is listening to me, how can I understand my son? I can't, right? I should start listening to my kids to understand them. So again, I'm rephrasing, even though I said not to rephrase, but I'm rephrasing this now. Again, when you are listening, it's all about genuinely paying attention. It's not about nodding, rephrasing, or saying what that person said. It's about paying actual attention and trying to listen. And the other important thing is, like when you're having a conversation, even though you really want to continue a conversation, the most important thing would be try to make sure that your conversation is brief. It should be short enough to create the curiosity, and it should be long enough to cover the content. So if your conversation is too detailed, people will tend to lose focus. And even you will also tend to focus on what you're going to say. Have you come across people where you talk a lot with those people, but you can't even remember a single word he or she has said? It's too many words. So always try to be brief. Try to be short on the topic, but again, good enough information to cover the topic that you're going to talk. Another last thing. This one came into my mind quite recently. So. Now, when it comes to a conversation, the other important part would be trying to listen to the words that are not spoken. Since you all mentioned about relationships, I can say something related to this. So if your partner, spouse, or whoever, if you had to ask, are you all right? And if the answer is, yes, I'm fine, you know that he or she is not fine, right? It's quite obvious. So it's an obvious thing we all experience. But again, in a deep conversation, sometimes it's very difficult, but it's a very, very important art also. Now, another example that happened to me yesterday, my daughter was having a team outing where she wanted to go to their master in charge's home for dinner and a movie, the entire team. So what she called me, and what she said was, Tati, I will call you 30 minutes before when I want you to pick me. That's it. So the way that I read between lines is, Tati, please don't call me time to time and bug me because I am having some fun with my friends. I hope that was the kind of indirect message. So I did not call her. So I had to wait until 12 midnight to get her call. So again, reading between lines is really, really important. I can share another very short example, and probably I can wind up also. So this was sent by Silakshi. I took her permission to share this. So yesterday, so she sent me a message. It's about the first speaker, doctor. His speech, Happiness in a Digital World. His speech is focused on mental well-being. Good morning. Above mentioned is a topic, and the area which going to cover by the psychiatric, so and so. Now, this was the message that I got. Stupid Hiruna, what I did was, this was my reply. This is my reply. So, probably what she was expecting would be just to make sure that my speech and the doctor's speech will not overlaps. So what I did was use ChatGPT, gave some prompts to get what I'm doing, read it, it made perfect sense, I sent it. So she was really, really humble and patient. So she said, thank you. So your speech does not overlap with so and so. And then it's fine. So this is the last mistake that we should never do. I mean, we can always use technology, that's fine. But when you are using technology in a conversation, make sure that it's not artificial. It has to be your own words. Even though it's bad English, even though it's crap, just use your own words. Just use your own words. Okay, so hope it's all right to share your message, Silakshi. Right, so probably with that, again, I'm trying to be brief, and I know this is not the best time to have a presentation. Maybe a conversation might be good, so I will take your advice next time and try to see if I can do it in a different way. Any thoughts? Any different?
More like a question or more than. Has faced when lecturing. There are different types of generations. So there are certain generations which doesn't take presentations. It doesn't process in their mind. Of course, for us also that doesn't work sometimes. But I try to do is making a conversation, getting some political characters, maybe something closer to them and all. Then again, there are a set of individuals, maybe a group, which doesn't get that also. Like it's zero, nothing goes in their brain. They are like in a different world, literally. So, what is the best way to approach this? Because when there's a set of students, there is a set of students, we can't leave a set of students behind. So at least we have to try to get them involved and try to get them into a certain understanding. So what's the best way to reach that?
Well, unfortunately, I would say there is no such best way for sure, because depending on the audience, depending on the people, it will differ. And again, I think I'm a firm believer that you simply can't force anyone to do anything or influence anyone to do anything. No, I don't think that's going to work, especially with the new generation. No, that's not going to work. So what you could do would be at least to share the consequences. That's all. If they really want to listen, they will listen. If they don't want to listen, they will not. And we as humans, probably we should be open enough to face that fact. I mean, when you said about like educating, especially the elder generation or maybe senior citizens, you have to face that fact. You should not expect them to understand everything, and you should not expect them to behave the way you want them to behave. It's never going to happen. But it's your duty to share them without having any emotional attachment on their behavior. But actually what we do is we do have an emotional attachment, thinking that when I say so and so to my kids or parents or whoever, he or she will change. That's not going to happen. People are different. You have to respect that. Even for us, do you really want to behave in a way where someone wants you to behave? No, right? We don't want that. So at least when I do presentations or lectures or whatever, what I try to do would be to make things simple, make things concise, and especially with the younger generations, I always try to give them more references than trying to teach them. Maybe I will try my level best, or maybe I will try to force or maybe use my energy to create the curiosity on the topic or whatever, and that's it. Some will learn, some might not learn. Again, this is my personal viewpoint. Someone else might have a different thought. That's perfectly fine. Any other comments? I know you don't have questions because it's not a technical presentation, of course.
If I may ask you, that means now you may be, since you are on kind of top layer, so you may be working on multiple generations at the organization. So when it comes to now the AI, generative AI also in a way of you are making a conversation with another machine generated context, right? So any tips that you can give to kind of have quite a meaningful conversation with the machine?
Right, okay. So I will try to maybe rephrase your question a little bit on me. So I would not try to label me as a person who's on the top layer, but I would try to label me as a person who's been there for a while, since I'm a kind of old guy. So just to be clear on that. So again, that comes with creative. So if I go back to creative and innovation. So as human beings, sometimes you need to be creative. I'm not saying I'm creative. I'm not saying that. But when I try to, because now my daughter is almost 16, so sometimes we have conversations through text. So when I have conversations, I really don't understand what she says. There are like A, B, C, B, C, B, Y, and so and so. What I do is I use ChatGPT on my mobile app, transfer it, try to understand what it is, convert it, and then reply back. So she's thinking that my dad is a, next generation dad, which I'm not. So again, and also I can give you another tip. This is a very, very recent observation that I did. So I spoke with that person also just to understand that person. So there was one individual, during meetings, conversations, brainstorming sessions, he was not super focused on the topic itself, but he's talking a lot about really good things. But then I kind of had a conversation with that person. So what he was doing was actually, while having the conversation, he was using AI to get certain things. So because he is typing certain things, he loses the focus on the flow of the conversation. So even though we think it's good, sometimes it's bad, because you just try to bring in your opinion, whereas the topic was somewhere else. And people notices those things. So again, it's not a clear set of rules. Use common sense. Use common sense. Sometimes it might be really useful, sometimes might not. Now in Silakshi's case, I thought it was useful, but I don't know. It's up to you to decide whether it was annoying or not, my reply. So sorry about the lengthy answer, but it's not black and white, to be honest.
Because, as you said, like some people are like these days. Maybe a question, it takes some time, and when they reply clearly, then I was like, oh, this person knows everything, but then we know that they type.
Exactly. Exactly.
But that we can sense it.
We can sense it. I mean, even in a conversation, when someone just types in a reply, even though you use your and alter it, still you can feel it. It's the same with a conversation. When you're not paying attention, you are not paying attention. You can't make them feel that you're paying. That won't happen. That won't happen. So if you really want to have a meaningful conversation, you need to actually pay attention.
With these online conversations, we don't have physical presence now. There are certain conditions when we are having a physical, when we have presence. We want that kind of, like, for example, interviews. Now there's no physical presence almost. So sometimes we realize that it's not properly communicated between the interviewer and the interviewee. So we want that, whether it should be continued like that or there should be change on that.
Well, actually, I mean, we have tried, when we do recruitments, we have tried different approaches. Of course, even right now we are trying. But when you, let's say, if you compare an online interview and a physical interview, the time and energy it takes to an interview is way too much. Because you need to pick certain scenarios, you need to pick certain questions which AI cannot answer. Tricky. Sometimes you might need to, tap the feelings of that person to see whether how he or she feels. So it drains a lot of energy. But if you do a physical interview, the energy is quite low. Within like 15 to 20 minutes sometimes, if it's a technical one, maybe maximum half an hour, you can judge or maybe make a judgment on that person. So we always try to go for physical interview whenever it's possible right now, because we don't have any health restrictions. But of course, sometimes depending on the context, we might need to do online interviews as well. And sometimes we do screening online just to make sure that we save the time on the both parties, just to make sure that a person that does not fit the profile comes in and wastes his or her time as well as our time.
Same thing applies for the online lecturing and trainings.
Exactly. And on the other hand, if you are working in a professional workspace, you need to have conversations online. And sometimes you can use videos and you can't force people to use videos. So, there are ethics behind those things. But what's important would be, again, if you really want to have a meaningful conversation, try to understand those people. I can share a very simple example. Now, one of my colleagues, when we have conversations, what we do is actually sometimes when we have ideas, we just throw those ideas to each other and try to get some reflection. So when we do that sometimes, like let's say when that person asks me a question, what I used to say would be, okay, look here, Machang, I'm thinking, just wait. He can't read that I'm thinking. Think, okay, now this bugger is writing an email or maybe replying to someone else's chat without paying attention to me, which I'm not. So again, people can't read your minds, people can't read your heart, right? So you need to express your feelings. So it's really important sometimes to make sure that you express yourself on what you do. So be cautious on those things. Otherwise, that will lead to so many, uncomfortable situations, I would say, putting them into a kind of diplomatic word. Any more thoughts? Okay, if not, then probably I can wrap things up. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Sorry I had to prepare very late, but I hope I kind of managed. So looking forward to maybe meeting you again someday. Thank you very much.